How would you find the midpoint between two coordinates? For example, if I gave you a coordinate here and I put a coordinate here, how would you find the midpoint or halfway between them? Now, one way is to get out a ruler and measure it and then go halfway, but that tends to be quite inaccurate, and sometimes in the exam you won't be given a grid, you'll simply be given the coordinates. So let's try and do a very clean and accurate way of finding the midpoint. Here's what you do. First, you find out what the two coordinates are. How do we do that? Remember, along the corridor and up the stairs. So let's do this coordinate on the right here. Along the corridor, so here's the corridor, the x-axis, that's 1, 2, 3, and up the stairs, that's 1, 2. So this coordinate is the coordinate 3, 2. How about the other coordinate? Again, along the corridor, that's -4, and up the stairs, that's 5. So that coordinate is -4, 5. Okay, but how does that help us find the midpoint? Are you going to finally get around to telling us how to actually do it? Here's how you do it. What you do is you add the x's and then divide by 2. You add the y's and then divide by 2. It might seem crazy, but it works. Okay, let's add the x's. Remember, the x's are the ones that come first. So a coordinate is x and then y. What are the two x's? We have 3 and -4. Let's add that. What's -4 plus 3? Okay, we're £4 in debt, -4, and then we're given £3. So -4 plus 3 would still be 1 in debt. So that's -1. So we've added the x's. Now we divide by 2. What's half of -1? Half of -1 is -1/2. So that is what we do. We've added the x's and then we divide by 2. I've given you quite a hard example, but it works for any example, so it's good to practice. Let's do the same trick for the y's. So we add the y's, so 5 plus 2 is 7, and then divide by 2. What's half of 7? Half of 7 is 3.5. So we added them, and we got 7 here. And then once we'd added the x's and the y's, we divided by 2. So the midpoint is -0.5 and 3.5. If you don't quite believe that, let's try. Along the corridor, so -0.5 would be about here, and up the stairs by 3.5, 1, 2, 3.5. And that does indeed look exactly like the midpoint between these two coordinates. For the next one, we're not even going to use the grid. I'm going to give you two coordinates and you have to tell me the midpoint. Our first coordinate is -3 and 6. Let's call that A. And our second coordinate, B, would be 5 and 4. Okay, you need to find the midpoint between these coordinates. What many students do is they try to guess the number in between. And for 6 and 4, you can kind of see quite easily that the midpoint is going to be 5 for the y coordinate. But for the x coordinate, and in general, it tends to be quite easy to make mistakes if you're just trying to guess what's in between the two numbers. Far better, I think, to do this method. You add them, add the x's, then half. And then you do the same thing to the y's. Add the y's, then half it. And that'll give you the midpoint. Let's do that. Add the x's. What's -3 plus 5? -3 plus 5 is 2. What is 6 plus 4? 6 plus 4 equals 10. So So that was the x's, that was the y's. Half of 2 is 1. So the midpoint is at 1, and half of 10 is 5. So the coordinate is 1 and 5 for the midpoint of A and B. Just to recap, you add the x coordinates, divide by 2, add the y coordinates, and then divide by 2. Finally, they might be tricky in the exam, and they might give you the midpoint, and you have to find one of the other coordinates. For example, let's use the grid for this one. Here's the point, let's call it A, and there's another point up here, which is the midpoint. Let's call that M. And you have to find the other coordinate. So for example, it would say M is the midpoint between A and B. This is a new example, not from the previous question. I'm just making a new one up. M is the midpoint between A and B. A is, and then what coordinate is it? We can see along the corridor 2, down the stairs minus 4. So A is 2 minus 4. M is, you can see along the corridor 6, down the stairs 2. So it's 6 minus 2. Find B. Find B. Okay, how would we do that? Well, this time we're not finding the midpoint. It's not a case of adding them up and dividing by 2. M is the midpoint between A and some other coordinate B around here. How would we find B? Well, here it's a bit simpler than adding them up and dividing by 2 to get the midpoint. Here what we do is we know M is halfway. How do we get from A to M? Well, we go 1, 2, 3, 4 across and 1, 2 up. But that was only halfway. So if that was halfway, if we go another 4 across and another 2 up, we'll get the whole way, all the way to B. So let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And that is the coordinate on here, 10 and 0, because it's on the x-axis. Okay, so the B would be 10 and 0. Or just doing it with the numbers, you can see to get from 2 to 6, you have to go across by 4, so go across by another 4 to get to 10. To get from minus 4 to minus 2, you had to go up by 2, so go up by another 2, and you get to 0. This example is slightly rarer, where they give you the midpoint and you have to find another coordinate. More often, you simply have to find the midpoint. And to do that, as you're kind of sick of hearing by now probably, you simply add the x's, divide by 2, add the y's and divide by 2, and that is how to find the midpoint.